I never imagined a quiet afternoon on my little patch of land would end with unmarked SUVs rolling up my driveway and half my neighborhood pointing fingers at me like I'd sprung a war on them. But there I was standing on the porch. 3 cars, red and blue, reflections on the barn, tin, and Linda Carter, Maple Grove HOA president, shouting that I was running government equipment in my backyard. I looked at the antennas behind the barn, the ones I'd put up to do a job I'd been trained for, and knew in that instant the rest of my life was about to get very loud. My name is Ethan Miller. I used to fix satellite relays for a living, the kind of work that lives behind closed doors and signed NDAs. After Sarah died, I traded city noise for this, a rickety farmhouse, a weathered barn, a few acres that smelled like sun, and chicken feed. I built a life of small things, mending a tractor, teaching the Labrador Bruno new tricks, until one winter a government contractor I trusted asked me to host and maintain a small relay on the property. It wasn't glamorous, it was boring in a very particular important way. Paperwork existed. Authorization existed. It was the kind of thing meant to be quiet. It worked behind a fence and a band of sunflowers so the neighbors didn't have to see it. Then Linda moved in. 2 years ago, she appeared sharp-heeled, sharper-tongued as if the neighborhood had been waiting for her to take charge. She didn't ask questions, she issued memos. If a mailbox leaned, she sent a notice. If your paint was off-brand, she took a photo. When she saw the delivery truck with signal infrastructure authorized equipment stamped on 3 metal crates, she didn't say hello, she sputtered, snapped pictures, and by dinner had a violation notice on my gate. Visual harmony, it read. Immediate removal requested. She started talking like authority was a thing you could buy at the hardware store. I tried the polite route first letter, then a patient phone call. Mrs. Carter, this is my land. The equipment is authorized. I appreciate your concern, but there's nothing to worry about. She smiled that tight smile and turned it into a charge sheet. Within days, there were flyers in mailboxes, spy on our streets, neighbors whispering on porches, a guy at the grocery giving me that look like I'd stolen something I couldn't return. Then someone egged the barn door. Small, stupid things that stop being small after they happen twice. The escalation was calculated. Linda had a knack for turning curiosity into outrage. She called the city inspector, the HOA board, and when nothing moved as fast as she wanted, she called the cops. Officer Daniel Hayes pulled up one late afternoon lights, muted official but careful. Linda stood behind him, phone up the grin of someone who believes the world should bend to her sense of order. She pointed at the antennas like they were a crime scene exhibit. He's broadcasting to satellites to foreign entities, I can feel it, she said, earnest and cruel at once. I kept my hands open, palms up. Officer, those are relays. They're part of an authorized network. He stepped closer, eyes darting over serial numbers, the engraved letters on metal casings that meant nothing to most folks. I could see the confusion, public duty versus something that smelled classified. Then the antennas clicked. A tiny green light blinked at the base, and Linda screamed, "It's active!" "He's recording us," Bruno barked. My phone buzzed. One message from a number I didn't recognize. "Do not explain. We'll handle it." 2 words that felt like a blindfold. That's the moment I realized I wasn't defending a hobby anymore. I was trying to keep a complicated, dangerous secret intact in a place that had no room for secrets. Officer Hayes looked at me the way a man looks at another who's lost his map. The next hours were a blur of stern voices and polite refusals. Federal agents in suits slipped from an unmarked SUV, talked in clipped phrases, flashed something that made Linda's camera shake in her hands. "This matter is under federal jurisdiction," one said to the crowd. Linda's face went from triumphant to pale. There was a crack in her armor. For the first time, she looked small. But small people claw at relevance. She didn't go away. She lit the neighborhood on fire by calling Channel 7, by organizing morning coffee gossip into a petition. He's running secret equipment. He's hiding things from us. The momentum she built was pure friction. It wore me down. I started waking up to new footprints around the fence, a drone hovering over the corn. Things that make a private life public. The federal men put up a polite barrier, took the antenna for a look, left me a card that said simply, "Stay silent." That should have made the worst part easier. Instead, silence became its own prison. That's when the doubt crept in. Late one night, I sat on the porch, Bruno resting his head on my boot, and I felt small in a way I hadn't since Sarah died. I asked myself the questions I'd been avoiding. Had I been arrogant to accept this work? Had I put my neighbors in danger because I liked tinkering more than I feared impossibility? What if Linda's fuss wasn't paranoia, but a warning I was too prideful to heed? The thought of selling the place, of leaving the barn and the antennas and this pile of trouble behind, sat there like a warm option. It would be painless. It would be cowardly. I tasted both in my mouth and almost chose the easy thing. I didn't pick it. I picked anger instead, which is a different kind of courage. I collected every piece of paper I had permits. Signatures, contractor names, and I stopped speaking in whispers. If Linda wanted spectacle, I'd force transparency legally, calmly. I recorded conversations. I called the contractor who'd authorized the relay. I put documents in front of my neighbors who were willing to look. A few of them changed their tune when they saw the paperwork. A few didn't. Linda doubled down. She mounted a crude antenna on her roof, started streaming patrol-style, telling anyone who'd listen that I was broadcasting radiation into their homes. She flipped a live switch one afternoon in front of a small crowd. I walked over to ask her to stop because I know what can happen when untrained hands fiddle with radio gear. She sneered, and then, God help me, she powered it on. Static filled the air. A low hum shivered through the fence, and for a heartbeat the world held its breath. Her homemade rig overloaded, flickered, and then there was a flash that seared the back of my eyes. The device on her roof melted into a blackened lump, smoke curling. She stumbled, dazed, and suddenly terrified in a way I'd never seen. The men in suits pulled up again faster this time, and that was the beginning of the actual end. The agents moved like a machine built for this exact chaos. They seized devices, scanned the soil, put Linda's phone into an evidence bag, and crucially, they replayed her live stream and found edits, timeline anomalies, proof she'd been engineering fear. Her petitions read like script notes. Her witnesses had coordinated talking points. The HOA board, once her stage, looked embarrassed, and the mayor's office asked for an emergency hearing. Linda was called in. She had the gall to lecture the room, to point fingers like she was the injured party. The video told another story. I stood in the council chamber the day they put her under oath. She tried the for the children angle, she tried the moral high ground, but the clips were there, her plotting her calls to the press, the drone footage of her planting cameras near my fence. The legal language was dry and precise, misrepresentation, harassment, creating public alarm. The HOA lost its investigative privileges. Linda's title was suspended pending review. They didn't drag her out in cuffs. This wasn't a movie. Accountability in these towns usually comes from paperwork fines, removal from committees, a public reprimand that strangles a reputation. That sufficed. The person who had made a community into a courtroom had to answer in public. I didn't dance. There was no confetti, no victory lap. I sat on the porch the night it happened, Bruno asleep at my feet, and felt the shape of exhaustion for the first time in months. I'd been exposed to the town, to agents, to the possibility that something bigger than me had been listening, and somehow that exposure was less terrifying than the months of private accusation. Linda's downfall was bureaucratic, embarrassing, and utterly human. She left the hearing with a packet of fines and a stare that tried to kill me with shame. I didn't gloat. I couldn't. What I had won was quiet, the kind you get when a noise finally stops. This isn't a tidy Hollywood resolution. The relay is still under oversight. The agents left me a protocol to follow, checks, reports, someone to call if anything strange appears. The neighbors are cautious. Some nod when I pass, others still avert their eyes. Linda lives down the street. She keeps to herself now. I see her sometimes on her porch, smaller than the memory of her roar. There are fences to mend, a barn door to replace, and the long, slow business of living with what happened. I tell you this because the story isn't about antennas or surveillance. It's about what happens when one person decides the world should work the way they want it to and pushes everyone else into that mold. It's about what quiet work looks like when the wrong eyes land on it, and about how fragile community trust can be when fear is fed intentionally. I learned the hardest way that silence can protect secrets, and that silence can also be used to manipulate, so you have to pick the moments you break it carefully. Don't let curiosity become a weapon.